Okay guys, day 2 of the week. So as promised, today we will be working on linear relationships and equations. Okay, but I'm going to give you a way that it's not so bad coming up with an equation for a linear relationship. Okay, so to find the equation of a linear relationship, you need to know 4 things. Number 1, I would take this down as a little note. Okay, you need to know the starting point. Okay, and starting point, remember we talked about on Monday, Tuesday's lesson, the starting point for direct variation is always 0. Okay, but for partial variation, it will be anything but 0. Okay, so you need to know the starting point. The other thing that this can be called is initial value. You guys this year are not writing EQAO. But when you do, or you won't have to, but for people that do, they generally use initial value, okay, and we use more starting point, but it's the same thing. And we are going to use SP for that, okay? The other thing you need to know when you're coming up with an equation is the rate of change. Sometimes that's given, and sometimes you have to calculate it. Okay, but you guys of course know how to calculate it because you did the lessons from last week. So rate of change, and we're just going to call that rock, okay? Third thing you need to know is the independent variable. Independent variable. Okay, I'm going to use IV for that. Okay, I'm just going to put a little star for the independent variable and the dependent variable. You will assign one letter to represent the independent variable. Okay, that will make more sense later when we do some examples. The last thing you need to know, the fourth thing, is the dependent variable, what that variable is. Okay, and we call that dv. And again, you will assign a letter, okay, to represent the dependent variable. Okay? So those are the 4 things you need to know. Now, let's talk about how we're going to put this together. So hopefully, let me press pause to copy that down. Okay, there's an equation here that for any test quiz, you would always be given it, okay? So, and that is dependent variable equals rate of change times independent variable plus starting point. Okay, so you don't need to memorize it, but what we do need to know is how to use it. Okay, so dependent variable equals the rate of change times, okay, multiplied by the independent variable plus the starting point. Okay, let's give you an example. So today, when you are making your equations, you will have to do it for 3 different scenarios, okay? One, you'll have to do it for word problems. You'll have to make up equations based on information in a table and based on a line, okay? So those are the 3 kind of situations that you could have for coming up with an equation for a linear relationship. Today, we're just going to cover word problems. Okay, then I will cover, next week, I will cover the tables and the graph. Okay, so word problem number 1. Candles are 30 centimeters tall and burn at a rate of 1.5 centimeters an hour. Okay, so if you can kind of picture, we've got our candle. okay, and the height of it is 30 centimeters, okay, but it's going to be burning for a while, and it's burning down a centimeter and a half, okay, each hour. So what we're going to do is, from this information, we are going to pull out these 4 pieces of information that we need to come up with our equation for this linear relationship, okay? So I always start out by, I would write these things down, okay? I always do it in this order. So starting point, rate of change, independent variable, dependent variable. Okay, and I just write those 4 things, equal sign, and before I start doing anything, okay? Now I go into the information given to pull it out. So starting point, candles are 30 centimeters tall. Well, you are going to be starting at 30. So my starting point's 30. You've probably already said in your head, oh, that must be partial variation. The rate of change is 1.5 centimeters per hour. So I write 1.5. Now be careful here, because this candle is not getting bigger at 1.5 centimeters, it's getting smaller. So I'm going to put a negative sign, okay? If you were to graph this, it would start at 30, and it should be going down at a rate of negative 1.5 centimeters an hour, okay? So my rate of change is negative. Now the independent variable and the dependent variable. So if you look at your rate, okay, it actually gives you the units for both independent and dependent variable, okay? And usually it's 1.5 centimeters an hour. So my dependent variable is going to be my height, right? And my independent variable is going to be how long it burns, right? So let me just write that. So height and time. So you say, okay, well, height and time, right? Height, time. Well, the height of the candle, how tall it is going to depend on the amount of time that it's burned. So this is going to be independent, and this is going to be dependent variable. So I'm going to write time. So, and for these, I should just assign 1 letter. So I'm going to do T, and I'm going to do H. Okay, so independent and dependent variable just include a letter. If you want, you can write time in brackets here and height in brackets here. Okay, so now we put it together and we make our equation. If you know all 4 things, you can come up with your equation. So the first thing is dependent variable. So that's going to be H equals my rate of change, which is negative 1.5. Okay, times my independent variable, which is T. Any number just times a variable, you just squish them together, right? So negative 1.5 T, and then plus my starting point. So that's going to be plus 30. That's my first equation for this linear relationship. Okay, like anything with this, it will take practice before it starts to feel easy. Okay, I'm going to do one more example, and then you guys will have some to practice at home. Guess there's no sense in changing that over, really, because this one also has regular. Okay. Okay, so here's the example number 2. David works at Subway and earns $12 per hour, $12 an hour. That's it. That's all the information we were given, and we have to come up with an equation for that. So I write down my starting point, my rate of change, my independent variable, my dependent variable. Okay, it's good to get in the habit of writing all those 4 things down, figuring them out before you try to plug it into figuring out the equation. Okay, so my starting point, what am I going to start at? When it's 0 time, has he made any money? No. So my starting point is going to be 0, direct variation. My rate of change, what is this going up by or down by? In this case, going up. It's going up by 12, right? Every hour he's making $12. My independent and my dependent variable. So you know that one is going to be his earnings, right? How much money, his earnings, and the other is going to be time, how much time he works. So those are my two variables. The earnings will depend on the time he works. So that means that this is the independent variable, this is the dependent variable. So I choose a letter. So for my independent variable, I'll use a T, and for my dependent variable, I will use an E. And I'll just put in brackets, this is time, and this is earnings. Okay, now that I have all those four things, I can put my equation together. So you would, of course, have this on your sheet. Okay, and any quiz that I would give you with this, you would be given this, this equation to work from. Okay? So when we put it together, we take our dependent variable, which is E, and equal to the rate of change, which is 12, and times my independent variable, which is T, so I just smush those together, and plus my starting point, plus 0. I don't have to write anything, right? Because my starting point is 0 plus 0, that doesn't do anything. So all my equation is this right here, okay? Now the nice thing about coming up with equations, and why people do this, is because you could be given anything. You say, okay, how much would David make if he worked 50 hours? Well, you take your 50, substitute it into your time, it'd be 12 times 50, and you would automatically come up with his earnings, okay? Okay, so that's all I wanted to cover for today. Like I said, for linear relationships, we got our word problem examples, coming up with equations based on word problems. Next, we'll be doing coming up with equations for tables, and then coming up with equations for lines, okay?